Welcome back to another episode of Half Court Press. He's Wilson Moore. I'm Jon Walker. We're here to talk some off-season hoops because unlike the off-season up until then, at least for Creighton, we've got some news, Wilson.
We do.
But before we dive into that, including news that involves next year's I-80 matchup,
That's right.
how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. Just as we all are getting through portal season,
Yeah.
getting through spring football season here in Lincoln, which you were also a part of a week or two ago.
Made the debut.
Yeah. Nebraska's. Are you helping out on spring game coverage on Saturday?
I'll see you there, buddy.
I'll
I'll have some notes and then I'll have another story on Sunday. So
love that.
I'm spring game full effect.
Love to hear that. But yeah, just getting through all of that, NBA playoffs, enjoying my Timberwolves performance so far. I'm not going to go as far to say anything more than that because over 24 years I have been conditioned to expect the worst from this team, but so far so good. Yeah, it's doing pretty well.
Yeah. I'm a LeBron guy, so I've not been a happy camper so far in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I respect the hell out of Jamal Murray's game winner the other night.
That was cold.
It was filthy. It was filthy. It was absolutely filthy. So yeah, type of shot that'll drop a man to his knees. But we'll see what happens.
Anthony Davis into the opposing bench will do that too.
I know it, man. I know it. But yeah, I'm good. It's been, like I said, we were just kind of waiting to hear really something of anything with Creighton, and it's happened over since the last time we hopped on here. So with that, Wilson, let's just dive into it. I think the lead thing, that we can both kind of flush out a little bit is the I-80 matchup. A couple of weeks ago, there was buzz that it was going to be on November 23rd. I think that it like came out through a records request that it was going to be on November 23rd, which really brought up some questions because Nebraska hosts Wisconsin that day. So then it was like, okay, so are people going to go to the basketball game in Omaha, then make the trip to, it was like, okay, a J-Score's worst nightmare and maybe favorite day. I don't know. But we found out earlier today through a joint release by both schools in a way, that they moved it up a day. So Creighton in Nebraska, the 58th all-time meeting between the two on the hardwood, will be Friday, November 22nd in Omaha.
And that is absolutely the correct call. I mean, to have it on the same day as football game was just dumb. I always respect the sort of like petty rivalry angle to all of that all, which, who's to say one way or another whether or not that was like a thing. That's fun. But I mean, just for the benefit of fans, not to mention the benefit of those of us who may have had to cover both. I don't know how that would have worked. Luckily, we don't have to find out. Before you hopped on here, John, Dylan, and I were talking about the possibility of like 11 a.m. football game that ends, hit the road, I-80, 7 p.m. basketball game, and then for me, it would be back to Lincoln after that because.
So do we know kickoff time for the Wisconsin game?
We do not know.
Okay, so here's where I wanted to go. What would be your ideal day in that situation? Would you want an early football game, or would you want a noon basketball game in a 7 p.m. kickoff at Memorial?
I personally would go with that second option just for the simple reason of I live in Lincoln. So in that scenario,
that's a good point.
When I'm getting out late at night, I have a 15-minute drive home instead of an hour-long drive home after a long day. That would be my main thing there.
That's a good point. I've heard Memorial goes crazy at night.
Yeah.
So I think that would be, I'd want the second option. I take the basketball game, early in the day. and a night football game so that I could experience maybe what Memorial is like at night. I think that would be
Yeah.
pretty cool. So yeah, but J Scores kind of avoid their worst nightmare. They can do
Yeah.
both now. You can go to the basketball game on Friday night, wake up on Saturday morning, tailgate, and go to the game.
See that now that can be a real like condensed timeline too. If it's,
Yeah, yeah.
7, 8 p.m. basketball game Friday night and then
An 11 a.m.
morning,
kickoff.
afternoon kick the next day. Like that is a turnaround right there. That's a whirlwind of about
Yeah,
15 hours or so.
yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. We've learned that both of these teams, we knew that they weren't going to look anywhat the same when they matched up this upcoming season compared to what we saw
Oh
this
yeah.
year. We knew that. Keisei Tominaga gone, Josiah Alec gone, Baylor Shireman gone, right? Like we knew that, but we have since learned that these teams are starting to round themselves out.
Yeah.
With Nebraska, that's another portal commitment. With Creighton, that's their first portal commitment. Um, and for the Huskers, what does their latest addition do to kind of round out the roster? I don't know how many scholarships they have left open. Creighton obviously didn't have a bunch to fill, but Fred Hoiberg certainly did, and they've promptly and I think strategically filled all of those spots. Not all of them, but the ones they've picked up, I think they've done a good job with.
Yeah, the latest is Connor Sejan, a sophomore guard from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Spent his first 2 years at the University of Wisconsin. So Nebraska got a real good look at him. Had a
Yeah,
couple chances. I think most notably, this past January in Madison, he had 12 points in 12 minutes against Nebraska. So that was a solid impression to make on the team and the
yeah,
coaching staff that no one could have guessed he would be joining a few months later. Season's interesting, um, in an interesting spot because he had a really good freshman year at Wisconsin. Just how many freshmen average 12 points a game in the Big
yeah,
Ten? It's not
yeah,
many. A Season averaged 11.7. So that's a really, really good freshman year. Sort of fell out of favor as a sophomore. Didn't get the same amount of playing time. Wasn't as productive when he was on the court, and sort of got lost in the shuffle on a Wisconsin team that was pretty deep. So he fit kind of the profile of a guy who enters the portal. Someone who
yeah,
needs a change of scenery, someone who the talent's clearly there, but would really benefit from a new setting, a new coaching staff, new everything. And he is now a Nebraska Cornhusker. I think his profile really fits with what Nebraska likes, what they were looking for out of the portal, a guy who can shoot 3 pointers, a guy who can stretch the defense, fit into their up tempo system. And one other thing about Esigian that I think, to draw a comparison between him and Gavin Griffiths, who committed to Nebraska a week earlier, is Nebraska is really leaning on um, guys with reputations as shooters who
yeah,
didn't have great seasons last year. That's Esigian, that's Griffiths, and with both of those guys, I think you get the sense Nebraska thinks they can tap into the talent that they clearly have. Fred Hoiberg has a reputation as someone who coaches up shooters and someone who develops shooters. And Nebraska has a system that get a lot of spacing, the
yeah,
idea is a lot of clean looks where guys with that natural stroke, that natural talent can really flourish. So I think Nebraska is really counting on Esigian and Griffiths to find what they had, find what they probably still have, and be really productive contributors from behind the 3 point line.
yeah. It seemed like that's kind of been their MO. Like Hoiberg and his staff went into the portal and they said, "We want shooters." Like that.
Yeah,
That is exclusively what we are looking for. Like we'll take a stretch guy like Andrew Morgan, but even he is a shooter.
yeah,
So like that was the priority. They knew that's what they wanted. And you heard John Calipari say this at his Arkansas introductory press conference. Teams are going to take longer to build this off season in particular because it's the last one of the COVID years that are deciding if they're returning or not. And also, you have as you know, our listeners have discovered through talking about Trey Alexander and Ryan Kalkbrenner, you have until May 29th to decide if you're staying in the NBA draft or not. Like that's a while. So you know, it's not a secret. My point bringing up John Calipari was it's not a secret that teams are going to take longer to build maybe this offseason than they have in the past. You're seeing a little bit of that with Creighton. But good on Fred Hoiberg and his staff for being able to identify what they needed, what they wanted, and not waste any time. They still have some holes to fill, sure. But again, they knew what they wanted for their system to replace what they're losing in guys like Alec and Tominaga. And they went out and got them. They didn't have to waste any time, right? So, you know, I commend them for their ability to do that. We'll see if it pays off in, you know, the winter, obviously. And who knows? Things change, right? Like, I don't know if there's a premium, I don't even know. Like, I'm not saying this off of any accord. I'm just saying if a guy like Chucky Hepburn was like, I want to come home, like that changes everything, right? But you know, sitting here on April 25th, good on them for having a good majority of the roster in place. So, which kind of leads me to Creighton's first portal edition of the off season. I was hang the banner. I was
I wish we had like a bell or something we could ring on the podcast, but that's beside the
point. I was about to leave the newsroom yesterday and go check on my cat before I went to the Creighton baseball game. And I saw the Creighton men's basketball account tweet are you a GIF or GIF guy?
I'm a GIF guy.
Okay, me too. So I saw the GIF of McDermott and I was like, something's happening. And so I sat there for a second and then I saw the post from Arizona State transfer Jemiah Neal that he had committed to Creighton. Pretty under the radar signing. You know, you couldn't have scrolled Twitter over the last few days and seen anybody say, man, you know, Jemiah Neal's in Omaha, you know, like that just wasn't a thing really for his recruiting process. But the Jays get him and it immediately fills kind of that wing that they needed. They lost it in Baylor Shireman. I don't want people to think this is, quote, a Baylor Shireman replacement because it's not. It'll look a lot different. Neal's 6'6", but he's kind of more of that like slasher more so. Like Baylor could score at all three levels. And Neal has struggled to shoot the ball, something that he's very well aware of. He's a career 26.9% shooter from deep. That doesn't fit the profile of a lot of guys Creighton recruits. But I talked to his NIL rep yesterday after he committed, and he had said, you know, when we were in Omaha, they were honest with us. He said, like, they think that maybe in some situations at Arizona State turned him into a tough shot taker. And so that impacted some of his shots. The goal, obviously, and this is kind of what his NIL rep was saying, was the goal at Creighton, and this is kind of, you know, part of the pitch, is that like you're going to get open looks here, and we'll help you develop as a shooter. But yeah, man, Creighton finally is on the board in the portal with their first edition in Jemiah Neal. So yeah, I like I said, it's not a Baylor Shireman replacement. But it gives them an option at the 3 above all else, right? Because otherwise you're looking at a situation where a couple different possibilities. Is it Jackson McAndrew at the 3? And Mason Miller at the 4 again? Is it Mason Miller at the 3 and Jason Green at the 4? This is it now. Is it Neal at the 3? No clue. But they have that variety in there to kind of do what they want. I think we've kind of seen maybe from a little bit of the way Nebraska's recruited too. You're looking to just have some type of variation in what you're able to do lineup wise.
Yeah, and Creighton, so roster still unclear, just as we've talked about every week. Ryan Kalkbrenner, um, Trey Alexander, still up in the air.
Yeah.
Possibly on a beach somewhere.
It's funny you say that. I'm having like a coughing fit right now. My goodness. It's funny you say that because like they lose, and I think they lose to Tennessee and a week went by and everybody was like, man, we haven't heard anything from Trey or Ryan or whatever. And I think the beginning of that next week, like Trey Alexander was on a beach in Punta Cana, Mexico. like legitimately. And so I thought it was so funny that, everybody's stressing over what Trey's thinking. Trey's in Mexico.
He's drinking something out of a coconut with a little umbrella sticking out of it.
Yeah. And then, this week at the time that we're recording this, we are 56 hours out from the early entrant deadline for the NBA draft. And he was in LA at the Clippers Mavs game a few nights ago. And they're like, my point is, I'm not saying that Trey Alexander's blowing this off. I'm saying that like, just calm down, right? Like they have to make a decision one way or another. The deadlines are there for a reason. Has it handcuffed Creighton in some areas through the offseason so far? Sure. We've talked about that at length so far this summer. But they're going to have to make a decision. They'll do it on their own accord. Nobody's going to their own timeline. But they have to do it soon. They said, we're 56 hours out from the deadline. It's 11 p.m. Central on Saturday. And by then we will know. The only other option, if they are not early entrants, would be the transfer portal. I think, I don't know. Like, could I really see any of them transferring? If they were going to come back to college, like, would they rather just go pro and test that option, right? I have no clue. But we're gonna find out soon, man.
Yeah,
we're gonna find out soon. Because the addition of Jemiah Neal, I said yesterday that it tipped the domino, really just because it was their first portal edition, right? But what Trey Alexander and what Ryan Kalkbrenner decide kind of affects the entirety of the offseason, kind of really the outlook on next season. Do you have to say Trey leaves, right? Is there that much more of an emphasis to go get a guy like Aiden Mahaney, who was in Omaha? Is there that much more pressure on, say, Larry Johnson or Ty Davis, one of the two freshmen coming in, to step up into that 2 role or maybe a 6-man role? No clue. And that's kind of the whole point, is we won't know again until they decide. And that's coming up, man. So we'll find out. We'll certainly find out.
we'll most definitely find out.
Other piece of small Creighton news. I say small. They filled the hole on their coaching staff. Jalen Courtney Williams, kind of their really kind of like, you have that guy on staff who's like for the players. Like he's a players guy. He's a players coach, right? And I don't mean that in like a oh, he's a pushover or anything like that. I'm just talking about there are guys on staff who just naturally, whether it be because of the age, the closer age gap, or whatever it might be, they relate to players the best. And that's kind of the guy that Jalen Courtney Williams was for Creighton. He leaves to take an assistant position at LSU, his alma mater, and Greg McDermott announces, I believe on Monday, that Trey Ziegler is coming back. He was a grad assistant 2 years ago during that Elite Eight run, but now he'll be back after a year as an assistant at High Point under Alan Huss, an offense, a guy from the Greg McDermott coaching tree, another offensive guru who had quite a bit of success at High Point last year. And you've got to think that a guy like Trey Ziegler had, a good amount to do with that, considering the players that they had.
Yeah. And for the Nebraska folks listening to this, Nebraska connection, Trey Ziegler's the son of Nebraska assistant coach Ernie Ziegler. So
really?
Yeah. So there
Would
will
you look
be
at that?
Yeah, the November 23rd, is it?
The second.
22nd. It was the 23rd. Yes, so November 22nd, there will be a father-son duo on opposite sidelines.
You don't see that very often.
No, you don't.
So yeah, that's really
like, have the Patinos ever coached against each other? I
don't know.
think of an example off the top of my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's obviously a unique situation.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be talking to Trey soon. I'm excited to meet him and get to know him. Joel, your guy Joel, my predecessor Joel, right? Was cool enough to kind of put me in contact. So shout out to him. And yeah, he had nothing but good things to say about Trey Ziegler. So I'm intrigued. I'm excited to get to know Trey, to kind of work alongside Trey in a way. Everybody kind of works alongside everybody in this business. So yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. But Creighton has, officially made 2 moves to kind of kick off their off season. We're a month into it, sure. But they hadn't really done much until the past week. Reestablish the dates for the I-80 rivalry. Sign their first transfer in Arizona State's, wing, if you will, Jemiah Neal. Found out that they'll be hosting Kansas.
Oh, we didn't talk about that. Yeah,
found out that they'll be hosting Kansas in the Big East Big 12 battle, and then obviously signed Trey Ziegler. Let's talk about that real quick before we stop yapping people's ears off, because that's seismic. I mean, you talk about early season conference or non-con matchups. You're thinking immediately like Champions Classic in Chicago, like the Duke and Michigan State and Carolina and Kentucky. Like you're thinking of matchups like that. And there's a reason we all tune in to watch those, because we want to see the best of the best compete way before they meet in late March. And we've seen it over the past couple of years. And now the basketball gods have blessed us with Kansas coming to the CHI Health Center. We found out earlier today it's December 4th. So almost a couple weeks after that Nebraska game. Creighton is going to host maybe the preseason number 1 team in the country.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe the preseason number 1 team in the country in Omaha. So that'll be electric.
Yeah, that'll be one of the biggest non-conference games just in the country. Not even in like just Creighton or in the state of Nebraska, just in the world of college basketball. That'll be one of the premier like non-conference matchups.
I so this is me being selfish, not taking anybody else into consideration, and that's fine, right? I so badly hope Ryan Kalkbrenner returns because I so badly would love to see 40 minutes of Ryan Kalkbrenner and Hunter Dickinson.
That would be fun.
And if that's me being selfish, then man, I'll embody every bit of that. But we need that. College basketball needs it.
Yeah.
We need 40 minutes of Ryan Kalkbrenner and Hunter Dickinson in early December. I would say in a marquee Wednesday night matchup. But let me make sure I'm not getting this wrong. The other interesting thing about this, Wilson, is, so a big portion of the Big 12 Big East battle is on that Wednesday. And they put the best 3 games all on that night. So you have Creighton, Kansas in Omaha. UConn is going to host Baylor. And Marquette is going to go to Hilton Coliseum and play Iowa State. All 3 of those are on that Wednesday night. So I wish they hadn't done that.
Back to back.
I guess. I wish they hadn't done that. I would have loved to have had one of those on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and I don't know, one on Saturday. But that's going to be a loaded night of college basketball. All hitting back home, obviously, with Creighton and Kansas. It'll be Kansas's first time playing Creighton in Omaha since 1951.
Wow.
So it's been a bit, some would say. One might say. So yeah, man, pretty eventful week for Creighton. Somewhat of a quieter week for Nebraska, but still an effective week with another portal addition, I would say. You got anything else to add before we let them go?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
I'm telling you. Do you have anything upcoming in the next week that you want to pitch? I don't. I'm just here, man. I'm just here.
We'll get the there will be some features in the coming, weeks and months with
sure.
some of the portal guys coming in, that sort of thing, but nothing set in stone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, me neither. So that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Half Court Press. We'll see you guys next week.